Welcome back to the channel. Today's lesson is called Catching the Wave and the Effortless Swing. So, what is the wave? Well, the wave is that sequencing of energy that we've talked about in the kinetic chain, that if we lower our mass and sink into the ground, then yes, we have a process of energy transfer from the ground up. And that process goes through each of our 32 rotational segments in our kinetic chain. We don't always talk about each of them, but that's how many there are. And they're all in rotation to one degree or another. And that rotation passes the energy up in a series of waves, or in helical circles that we'll talk about, until it reaches the arm and then extends out to the hand. And as we get to the turn of the swing, and we make even a sharper upward turn of the hand and the body, the racket extends out on the swing circle and accelerates around the curve, like the water skier going around the water ski boat that turns. So the wave is when we sync up the process of this building of energy through our body and out into our arm and hand, and just catch it, the wave just building and cresting right at the turn of the swing. And if we can sync our movement in our arm and our racket path in that wave, we get what some instructors call the free ride of the arms. That's catching the wave. And that's the effortless part of the swing. Catching the wave look like in a tennis swing? Well, it just so happens I was filming one of our GOAT candidates, Novak one day, and as I reviewed the footage this week, I realized that I had captured the exact topspin forehand swing that he used to win his last point in his Olympic gold medal match over Carlos Alcaraz. It was a step around inside in topspin forehand, a beautiful shot, and I'll play it for you here. Of course, the GOATs have spent years in refining their technique and learning how to sync their swing with the catching of the wave. But this is not something, a skill that's beyond an average player if they have some instruction. You know, even dogs can catch waves, as we've seen in the dog surfing contest in the image behind me. Well, there is such a thing as goat surfing as well. And that's what we're going to learn, Goat Surfing 101. You're not going to want to miss this instruction. I think it is a good representation of the kinetic chain process, where we see a bunch of parts from our lower body to our upper body all in rotation. And the wave of energy moves, you know, up in this helical, swaying, swirling manner. Combined, we'll talk about later, the spirals of the body, and then moves out to the shoulder, and then out to the arm, and then out to the hand. And then we have the acceleration of the whip release. And you can see that the green, what represents the energy mapping of the kinetic chain, starts fairly small at the beginning and moves up. As it moves up, it gets thicker and thicker and thicker until we have a big green swath in the catching of the wave action in the whip release. So if all this is looking and sounding very strange to you, and you may be wondering, hey Kim, where's the proof of this vision you have? Well, the proof is in all the kinematic sequencing studies that have been done by scientists in all these different sports. And in the background here, you can see sort of a standard kinematic sequence diagram. And you can see that the speed of the segments moves in waves. You know, the lower waves start to accelerate, hips start to accelerate, then they start to deaccelerate. Then the chest accelerates, deaccelerates. The shoulder accelerates and deaccelerates. The hand and the arm accelerates and deaccelerates. Finally, the racket accelerates through in the whip release. And that's what Roger Federer was trying to say to the Dartmouth graduates this year in his commencement speech. You know, Roger was known for this effortless style of play that everyone always talked about, the Baryshnikov of tennis, etc. And he was telling them that, yes, that's the impression I wanted to convey and the way I wanted to play, but I had to work very hard to create that style of play. And so we have to move away from our traditional sort of vertical stance, rigid posture, standing straight and swinging like this. You know, we have to adopt a much more athletic mode of being, you know, with a athletic posture, a tilt of the spine. And we'll also talk about some new dimensions of that athleticism in this current lesson. Now, using socks form again, I want to focus on the sort of more the energy movement map of catching the wave. So in this slide, I've added some 3D graphics around the body to convey the importance of this shifting and bending and torsion that we want in the large parts of our body in the spiraling motion. We don't want to forget about the core of the body. And yes, you know, our chest and ribs and shoulder complex are spiraling up, gathering energy up here. And we're also going to be shifting our weight back into our trail leg. And again, we're going to, if we have time and is appropriate, we can shift some energy into that trail buttocks and glute, which is the largest muscle, most powerful in our body. So we want that external rotation of the femur of the leg in the hip socket down this way. Sometimes you can do it a little, sometimes a lot, sometimes not at all. But we're always looking to try to load this if we can. So that's another incentive for quick early preparation that we've talked about in other places. Early preparation will give you the time to load. Even maybe a little here, it's going to make a big difference in your swing. As again, this is the most powerful part of our body. And in phase 2, the spiral in and down from handbrake with the side bend. There's so many things going on with a coiling of our bending and twisting of our body, the side bending, coiling, twisting and cocking back of our hitting arm, wrist and hand. You know, this is that cocking move that we've been talking about. We have the lateral bump. We have the side bend supposed to give us coiled energy to connect our hitting arm with our rotating body, spiraling body, but also to give us room for our arm swing to come from inside out. If we don't have the side bend, very difficult to get it inside out swing path, which is critical to a high level swing. So all these things are important to work on and be taken up separately. So we've talked in the movement from the slot a lot about the arm movements and how we want to sequence release of this energy in the master move with the arm. We won't go into that again. Focus now on the larger parts of the spiral, the lower swing center and upper swing center, and how as we are in our bent, coiled, and drop position here, the first thing that is going to start is going to be the release of our spiral hips movement. And while the hips start to unwind, we often have another little pullback of the back coil of the upper hitting area. Not always, but if we have time and we can do it, we should do it. We can draw in our hitting arm more into that slotted position as the hips have started to unwind. But at some point, you know, as the hips start to unwind and they start to slow down and eventually become arrested by the other movements that we've been talking about, the upper half of the body is going to want to unwind, and we let it unwind against the first snapping of the pelvis and lower half. Then we're going to have a spiraling centered turn around the upper half. And so we want to ensure that, remember we talked about the center turn of these two swing centers, and we had the exercise of the butt back exercise where we had the chair back here. And what we want to avoid is the tendency of all players, recreation and pros, talked about it with Coco, is there's a tendency in this spiraling, rotating action to have the hitting side and hitting pelvis extend too much forward and too aggressively to the target, because that's just our mentality. We usually have a linear model where we're always thinking about moving towards the target with our hand and our body. And so as soon as we start to get into that mentality, driving with our right side too much, then we're moving our swing center, lower swing center, several inches forward, making our point of contact very dicey, very inconsistent, and actually robbing us of power as well, because as our body moves forward like this, we're straightening up and losing the ability to have a torqued swing around a fixed center point. So we have to keep some focus on this idea of a centered turn, and one way we can do it is don't think about initiating the rotation or spiral from this right side, which is our natural inclination, our dominant side, pulling out, but think more of pulling in with the non-hitting hip inside, just like in our butt back exercise. And we're trying to, as the right cheek buttocks comes off in this spiraling movement, the left one should be rotating back and touching the chair, not extending out, but a centered turn. And so just the swing thought of pulling with the left side, and there's even a little pulling with the non-hitting hand side that you can think about as a keeping the center turn rather than letting the right side become so dominant. So the whole idea of pulling with the non-hitting side, both top and bottom, will help us do a center turn. And as we move out on the swing circle in the runway, as I called it, we get to the turn of the swing, and this is the takeoff portion where we're going to have to produce a much more vertical swing path in our spiraling action. But here's where all this body energy that we've been building in the spiral now is flowing out through our arm, into our hand, into the handle that's lagging us, and then into the final twisting and pulling of the racket handle around the curve. So we're not extending our racket or our hand towards the target in any way. This is just a fundamentally wrong, poor technique that's advocated. And there's nothing more important than, so where do we move our hand? So if traditional tennis is telling you to move your hand to the target, I say that's a poor technique. In every other swing sport, there's a curved path of the hand, just as there is obviously a curved path, a spiral of the racket, which is attached to the hand. How could it be otherwise? So we don't want to interrupt that curving path. We want to accentuate it and make it as smooth as possible. But again, the turn of the swing, that's when the whole wave has caught up, and we're now riding that wave in our swing. So we're not trying to then manipulate and overtake the action with our arm and hand, which is the recreation mode, and try to do some funny control of contact. So we're back to the principles that we talked about in the Zen of contact, in the sense that we're working with the laws of physics, We're working with the tide, we're working with the wind, not fighting it, and we're in sync with that. And it becomes this flowing, beautiful, arcing release of energy out, spiraling out through our hand. And even as I demonstrated in the ball toss, the final twisting and pronation of the forearm as we move through contact, we don't have to consciously do that. We just let the spiraling form do that for us. And it will come out just about perfect. You know, again, if we have the right swing path and the right form that we're releasing, that we haven't straightened up or done some other, you know, poor thing with our body. Then, of course, we have the final spiral in and down, typically down. Sometimes it's up here, I agree, but most of the time it's sort of a spiral up and down. And that's the 4 phases in the new spiral mode. So that's the movement map of this new level of the swing that we're working on. So we're moving from large circles of just staying out and in to now a spiral up and in, and adding a lot of sophistication to the points that we should focus on during that swinging process. So we're moving higher and higher, ascending Goat Mountain here and getting to another level of skill as we work our way up to the goats, up to the experts on this mountain for our topspin forehand.